Hey Faith Family, welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast at Calvary Bible, where we go beyond the Sunday sermon to explore some rabbit holes and to bring some biblical truths to the surface. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. All right, we're back for another week.
Yes.
You and I are just sitting down again.
It seems like it went very quickly.
That's right. But for everyone else out there, it's been a week. And if you're an astute watcher of this podcast on YouTube, you will notice that Randy and I are wearing the exact same shirts.
Yes.
Than we were last week. So
nice ones.
It's because we just really like these shirts.
Yeah. And we never wash them.
It's actually because I'm in Michigan when you're listening to this, probably.
Yeah.
And
I should be in Mount Joy.
You should be. So we're recording this episode a week ahead just to give you something to listen to next week. And it's on a topic that I think's an interesting one, that of, you ready? Drum roll. Fundamentalism.
Now, you've had this on your mind.
I have.
For a lot of weeks, saying if we could do an extra recording to fill in for a vacation or something. You really you wanted to do that. Tell me, why did you want to do that?
So you call us fundamentalists.
I do, for the
fun
often.
Of it. Yeah, and it's been probably, I feel like, a couple of years since you've delineated the what you would say or have said capital F fundamentalism and lowercase f fundamentalism. And so you often say it in jest.
I do.
On a Sunday morning during a sermon.
Half joking.
Yep, we're good fundamentalists around here.
Yep.
And why do you, what's the half joke to that? And then what I want to talk about through the episode is what's a good fundamentalism and what's a bad fundamentalism, and how should we be thinking about that?
Yeah, if I should have thought about this too. If we had Pastor Rich with us, Rich and I both grew up in fundamentalism with a capital F. I thought I was in the what would you call it? The epicenter?
Yeah,
that's okay. I thought I was in the epicenter of it. Rich was.
Yeah.
Because his father, talk to Rich sometime, his father was the head of it for a while. And so we both, when we first started to minister together, we had a lot of similar stories about, wow, look at the way in which we were brought up. Especially the way in which we were brought up theologically, like what were the things that you knew, they just were, they just existed and no one questioned them.
Yeah. So you probably know the history better than I do. I know a little bit of it, but can you give the folks just a quick history of the fundamentalist movement?
Yeah. The best thing for us, it's been, I don't know how many years since I read, there was a landmark book on this, but fundamentalism, so a church like ours, especially if you're fairly new to Calvary Bible Church, Bible churches all emerged sort of in the same time, and they were reactionary. They were reactions against, back then we would say they're reactions against liberalism, but that word now, I don't really know what it means. But, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about theological and ecclesiological church type liberalism. So the Bible church movement comes along, and it is trying to react against a group of churches that are starting to treat the Bible differently. So when we talk about fundamentalism with a capital F, I'm using that term to describe the mindset that was sort of foundational in this movement, which means we hold to the fundamentals of the faith tightly, which is good.
Yeah.
But along with that came a certain attitude, a certain arrogance with interpreting the scripture, and certainly a certain cutting divisiveness, are some of the character traits of fundamentalism with a capital F. So I'm sure it's done a lot of good. I don't want to, my purpose isn't, and our purpose in this is not to critique the movement necessarily. It's just to say Calvary Bible Church starts with, so when I first arrived here in 2003, for instance, one of the questions I had to ask before agreeing to be here was, on a scale, where are we as fundamentalists? because I had come out of a fundamentalist, a local church, strong fundamentalist training, and it really had been in, reacting and acting, interacting with this movement for a long time. So before arriving here, Michelle and I wanted to know, well, where are you on the scale, on the spectrum of fundamentalism? Where are you? Had they said, and I can say this now after all these years, had they said, no, we're like a 9 or a 10, more than likely we wouldn't have come, because that's not the environment that I'm comfortable in. Capital F with those character traits.
Yeah.
And so much so, and the reason why I was asking the question, of course, in the early years was IFCA, the Independent Fundamental Churches of America, IFCA. And remember, the joke was, some of you remember the joke, right? I fight Christians always.
Yeah.
Something like, which is sad, but you know that sometimes when there's a caricature like that, there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
So the IFCA is on our signs and so forth. So I'm a little bit antsy about what am I getting myself into?
Okay. Can I sum up where
we're going so far? Go ahead. Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you right, the fundamentalist movement in America starts probably around the same time, roughly, that Calvary Bible Church is birthed in the 40s, 30s, somewhere in that range. And you've got mainline denominations who are drifting theologically. They're reading the Bible differently. The way they, like you said, the way they practice church life is different. And the fundamentalist movement in America is birthed because of a reaction against that. And that's not a bad thing. That's here's what we believe are the fundamentals, right? And fundamentals are a good thing in sports. You just drill the fundamentals.
You have to know the fundamentals.
So you practice them, and theologically speaking, the movement says, here are some fundamentals that we are going to hold to tightly, and we're not going to swerve on. And out of that time frame, Bible churches like Calvary Bible Church form and react against in probably a good way. And now Calvary Bible Church is started there, but then along the way, there's a culture and a mindset, like you said, that kind of comes along with that forms the caricature of I fight Christians always. Or is it even maybe safe to say that maybe there was some legalism that is associated with it? Like, I'm pretty sure I've heard Rich say, something to the effect of, well, if if there's a church service, you're there, and if you're not a good fundamentalist,
or you're certainly not a good Christian.
Or if you didn't dress a certain way, you're not a So
there were some standards that were required.
Right.
And I think that's a fair assessment. That's part of the context. That's part of the culture.
And so when you differentiate between a capital F fundamentalist and a lowercase fundamentalist, the capital F fundamentalist is not something we want here, because you would define the capital F as someone who is going beyond just biblical and church life and going into extra biblical standards for church and life.
One of the big deals, part of this too, was this word separation. That was a big word. Who do we separate from? Why do we separate from other Christians? That was a big part of it too. So if we get to the small f part, right, it's because of, and this is inevitable. So being here all these years, for better or for worse, we have the potential to change the culture of a church. Little, slowly but surely. It's just because we've been here a long time. So a couple of things that, when I talk about we're fundamentalists with a small f, is because, first of all, there's a sense in which we want to read the Bible humbly. And I believe, to use a big term, which is important to me, we want to practice hermeneutical humility, meaning that the way in which I read the Bible, I do it humbly, knowing that other good Christians have read it differently than me for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't bring myself as a Christian to have an arrogance in my readings.
Okay.
I can't do it.
I was making a list here of warning signs that you might be a capital F
Yeah.
fundamentalist.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
reading the Bible in a way.
Yeah.
Well, how about this? Majoring on a minor.
Well, that's fine too.
Is that?
That is, but let's start with
Okay.
the reading
Can
itself.
you give an example of
Yeah. Yeah,
because
sure.
we're not talking about
Yeah.
the bodily resurrection of
No.
Jesus.
No, what we're talking about is, do you know when Jesus is coming back?
There you go.
Okay. So, the fundamentalist movement is also intertwined with a large emphasis on prophecy. So if you're an older parishioner, you remember prophecy conferences. This is all part of the culture of the church sort of birthing itself. And so I want to maintain humility in my readings, because I know there's a lot of Christians who believe differently about
Mhm.
things like the rapture
Yeah.
and the millennium and all those things.
Yeah.
I have a view, I have a reading,
Which is good.
but I want to practice it humbly.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't bring myself to say I have the only reading that's true
Mm-hmm.
on such things. So
Right.
so I would start with that mindset. With a small f, we are humble in the way in which we read the Bible. That doesn't mean we're light on truth. That just means that we recognize that truth is not always as clear as we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me when I say, if you think it's clear, then I want to literally humbly say, no, you don't. You just don't know the issues enough yet. And if I
Yeah.
explain some of the issues, now it's not clear anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that, just remember, there's been so much thinking for all the centuries on that. So, but then I get to the issue of majoring on the minor issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be one of those signs where, oh, you're moving towards the capital F.
Right. And
Yeah.
end times
Yeah.
kind of conversations. That's an area that it's important. It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
We should have an opinion and,
Yeah.
and think about
Yeah.
it. But it's not one of the essential doctrines
Yeah.
of our faith for, if you don't get this right, well, you're not a Christian then.
Yeah. And what if I said something like an issue of dress code
Mm-hmm.
and music style,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? How dogmatic are we about this is the dress code and this is the only dress code?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you went to Bolivia, what was the dress code like?
It was not the same as it is here.
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to angle this, but
Yep.
those are some of the minor issues where you're not going to be able to go to the Bible. You'll go to the Bible and find issues about dress code, and you'll find issues about music.
Mm-hmm.
But will you find the specifics you need to create a dress code and a music style for a church? The answer to that is no,
No.
because
Right.
I've challenged people to do
Mhm.
this before, and you can't.
Mm-hmm.
The verses just don't go that specific. So so that would be one of those, if you're trying to think about warning signs that you're moving
Yeah.
toward the capital F.
Yeah.
So just think this through, right? The from the capital F to a small f, I am going to be careful about dividing myself from another Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Are they in the faith family or not? And if they're in the faith family, are we unified or not?
Yeah.
There are reasons to divide,
Sure.
but I am fundamentalist with a small f will separate for different reasons
Mm-hmm.
than with the capital F.
Yeah, and a lowercase f fundamentalist might divide or give some space, but they're not gonna be combative or fight
Right.
over something that doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Anybody wondering,
All over.
if you're wondering, well, what would be, someone who refuses to turn from their sin,
Yeah.
biblically speaking, there's separation that needs to happen,
Mm-hmm.
especially from our perspective as pastors.
Mm-hmm.
What about a divisive person? A person who's always divisive?
Yeah.
Well, according to the scriptures, guess what? We need to have some separation from that type of person.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says at the end of Romans, mark that person and have nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
So there are some,
Mm-hmm.
but it's different from well, we disagree on certain things, therefore we're going to divide.
Mhm.
So there's some factors like, I mean, I look at my own pilgrimage moving away from that. Why did I move away from that emotionally? And why did I move away from that movement theologically, from the capital F to the small f? Why did I make that shift?
Mm-hmm.
So,
are you asking me, or are you asking them?
No, I was just sort of thinking, why would a person do that? What is it that you experienced to make you do that?
Well, and I think maybe the answer would be it doesn't seem to create a healthy environment. It smacks of pride and exclusivity.
Yeah.
That I don't think is healthy and good. And so, I mean, my own story, like growing up in this independent fundamentalist church, I was definitely not at the epicenter of it, but I've seen it enough. I'm in the felt the shockwave effects of the fundamentalist movement, and have suffered for it in my own journey, and had to process some of it. And I just think it's a good question to clarify, because we do talk about it and we do want to be fundamentalists to a degree. The unfortunate thing, I think, is the word fundamentalist gets a pretty bad rap.
Wow.
Because it comes with all kinds of baggage. It comes with the stereotype of, holier than thou. I do the way I do church, the way I do theology, the way I read my Bible is better than your way. And if you don't fit into the way that I think and process the scriptures, then you're a less than Christian.
Yeah.
And that's just, unfortunately, what comes up when anyone says the word fundamentalist. You don't want to be labeled a fundamentalist in our culture or society.
I don't think so. I think it's counterproductive to making disciples as far as the label goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the label doesn't help.
Now, another one of the distinctives, and this is where I think you half joke with us, but a characteristic of a fundamentalist is they're emotionless, right? And so you'll jest and say, we're good fundamentalists here, so we don't feel, we don't feel things. And that's probably, that's obviously hearkening back to the days where the fundamentalist was truth, 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 and it was just all informational and technical, but there was maybe not as much of an affection for God as there was just an affection for knowledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you, I think, are trying to push us away from being an emotionless people in our theology and love for the Lord.
Yeah, and I think, what you're hoping is that statements like that, not so much pushing people, but helping people recognize that the way in which they worship God is, sometimes lacking in an emotional response that should be there. I mean, the best news of all should bring great joy. And, and
it's okay to feel that.
We should feel that.
So, question in closing: what kind of a fundamentalist should we be?
Well, I think we have to be a people that are. Does this sound familiar? That we're biblically shaped.
So in my notes, I have that.
Do you have
word.
that down?
Yep.
Yeah.
Biblically shaped fundamentalist.
I think what we're trying to do in our years together is we're trying to help people read the Bible well.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So we want to be fundamentalists who read the Bible well, and I think that's going to keep us humble. We should be reminded regularly of God's mercy. That should help us be a merciful people, a gracious people. We should be able to balance grace and truth, to use some biblical language. So I think that's what we want to be, And I think for us, just remember our heritage, and it is difficult to outrun your heritage. So our heritage would be heavy on truth, light on grace. Right. Graciousness is what I would say. We're heavier on the truth component, and I think we want to balance that. Our Lord, for instance, gives the great example, right? He's full of grace and truth.
Mhm.
We beheld his glory, right? And
Mhm.
so I think we want to move towards that gloriousness, to portray that balance. I think that's a healthy thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. So I said I wrote biblically shaped down here too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're wondering, that's one of the core values that we've kind of nailed down here. It
Yeah.
hasn't gotten as much press recently,
Right.
in some Sundays,
Yeah.
but biblically shaped is one of them.
Yeah.
And so when I was asking that question to myself, I wrote down, we want to be a gracious, and you added humble and merciful,
Yeah.
which is good too.
Yeah.
So a gracious, biblically shaped Christian who holds tightly to
The
the
fundamentals,
fundamentals
yeah.
that are
Good call.
truly fundamental doctrines
Good.
that we Christian orthodox doctrines that we need to hold to.
Yeah.
So let's cling tightly to those.
Yeah.
Let's fight for those. Let's stand firmly on those.
Yeah.
And
what's the wording of our biblically shaped? Is it holding to, or
we stand?
We stand on the
the
unchanging word in an ever-changing world.
That's
we
right.
stand on, we stand on the scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we want to hold tightly to the scriptures.
Yep.
And as culture changes, there's sometimes where culture is going to shift, one way or the other, and not necessarily a wrong way, one way or the other. But we want to be just people who know God's word and are gracious about our interpretation of it, and are gracious towards people who think differently on things that aren't what we would consider fundamental doctrines. So.
Mm-hmm. And one last thing, our experience shows and the research shows that there's a lot of damage that's been done by fundamentalism as much as liberalism. Especially for the fundamentalists, they'll think that all the ills are occurring because of liberal churches, but that's not true. There's a lot of people who are no longer in the faith because of fundamentalism too. The way in which they've been treated, the way in which they've been taught scripture. There's a lot of people who have bailed because of the mindset. I don't want to contribute to that. One simple thing is to say, if you have a question about the Bible, I want to hear it. I don't ever want to create an environment where we don't allow such questions because, to quote a former professor of mine, because we have to defend the Bible. We don't have to defend it. So if you have questions, ask them. Yeah. Because that's what we do, And we also say humbly, we don't have all the answers.
Right.
We don't. And I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. I'm okay with that. I'm growing. I'm trying to learn. So I'm comfortable saying, no, my reading may not be the best reading. It might be the only one you get this weekend, but that's, that's for another time.
And I would say that's probably one of the, in my mind anyway, one of the distinctive things about you and your ministry and your pastorate here is that humility and a contentment to leave the ambiguity or the tension in a text, as opposed to dogmatically saying, this is the way, this is how to interpret this verse, this chapter, etc. And it's not, it's comforting, and yet at the same time, it's unsettling.
It's unnerving.
Yeah. Especially those who've grown up in that fundamentalist
I
kind
have
of a
to know
mindset.
The answer.
Yeah, I want the answer. The black and white. Exactly how I should behave in a situation, how I should think about a doctrine. And if I don't have the answer, then I'm not okay until I can get it. But think hard about things and be humble about it. Be gracious. Good. I think that's a great caution, though, actually, just to say that we as fundamentalists, biblically shaped fundamentalists, don't want to do damage to the non-believer, the people in our own flock. We don't want to be fighting inwards. We want to be just gracious and loving, and I think that's the salt and light that Jesus is getting at. He wants us to live that kind of a life. So good. All right. Well, that was fun.
That was fun. Another F.
Fun. I don't have a fun fundamentalist joke for you.
Good.
I bet you there's
That's
some
good.
out there, though.
Yeah.
Do you know any?
I don't.
Oh, come
I'm
on.
the world's worst at jokes, so I don't remember them. I don't read them.
What does a
But there are a lot
fundamentalist
of-
do for fun?
They don't.
Gotta be
They don't have fun. Yeah,
there
that
we
was a
go.
good
There's your joke.
That was a good joke.
There's your joke. We did
I like
that.
that.
All right. Bam. All right. Well, thanks for joining us again on this week's episode. Again, questions from the sermons can be emailed into podcast@cbcmj.com. Or if you've got like a topic that you want discussed for another week that I'm on vacation, because I'll go on vacation again.
You
So
will.
we'll do another one of
You have
these.
to.
Randy doesn't go on vacation. So
will.
we'll do another one of these sometime just about a particular subject or topic, and you can email those in too. So we love it all and appreciate you guys. So take care, be a good, biblically shaped, gracious fundamentalist. All right. Have a great week, guys. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode. And remember, our Sunday sermons are meant to lead us to a life of worship beyond Sunday.